Well, exactly 1 week ago, recreational marijuana sales became legal here in Connecticut.
And as more and more people start buying it, doctors now have a warning for parents. Keep those edibles far away from young children. Channel 3's Hartford Bureau Chief Aya Galal is live right now at the UConn Health Campus in Farmington with more on their message tonight. Aya?
Hi, Mark and Aaron. Yeah, and doctors here are concerned about more young children ingesting marijuana edibles. We're talking about things that look like gummies and snacks. And here at the Connecticut Poison Control Center, which is out of UConn Health, they're expecting a tenfold increase in the number of calls, and preparations have been underway so that experts know how to handle the surge in calls. The marijuana edibles can look like gummies, cookies, ice cream, and other snacks, and they're dangerous if they end up in the hands of young children.
Like candy. These products look even more like candy, so we know there are going to be accidental ingestions.
We are most concerned about the health dangers for our little ones, the pediatric population of small children under 6.
With recreational marijuana sales now legal in Connecticut, doctors at UConn Health expect to see a tenfold increase in the number of calls to Connecticut's Poison Control Center for children ingesting marijuana edibles.
For parents that have edibles at home, don't refer to them as candy. Don't treat them like candy.
The number of children accidentally ingesting cannabis products has spiked. In 2017, there were 200 cases. In 2021, that number jumped to 3,054, meaning a 1,375% increase. Most of the children treated for cannabis consumption found the products in their own home, and about 30% required hospitalization, including critical care.
Beware, be wary, put those cannabis products out of reach, put them in child-proof containers.
Doctors and state officials are urging parents to use common sense and be cautious about where edibles are stored. Edibles are supposed to be individually wrapped and sold in child-resistant containers. But Attorney General William Tong says that is not always the case.
There are very strict requirements and guidelines as to what you can sell, what the THC content of those products may be, and how you can market and package those products.
And the Attorney General adds that those who sell counterfeit edibles will be held accountable. Meanwhile, doctors are urging parents to save Connecticut Poison Control's number in their phones. In case a child accidentally does ingest an edible, you should immediately call. Reporting live tonight in Farmington, Aya Galal, Channel 3 Eyewitness News.